And some background on this paper is that, as the name implies, it involves a medication called liraglutide, which is a GLP-1 receptor agonist. And this is a type of medication that was originally used for diabetes treatment because it can stimulate insulin release from the pancreas in the context of elevated blood sugar levels. But over time, it was noticed that subjects or individuals taking these medications were also losing a significant amount of weight. And it turns out that GLP-1 agonists can also act as significant appetite suppressants. One criticism around GLP-1 agonists is that the weight loss they induce potentially consists of a lot of lean body mass loss in addition to fat loss. One caveat in this regard that I've seen some people talking about or bringing into the conversation is that lean body mass losses, particularly muscle loss, although lean body mass is just kind of a proxy for muscle mass that's often used in research, is also seen when losing weight via any typical reduced calorie diet, right? Just cutting calories alone often leads to losing lean body mass if the individual is not resistance training and eating enough protein. At the liraglutide only group, who were taking liraglutide during the maintenance period, they did not see decreases in lean mass, even while seeing slight decreases in fat mass. And even more so, looking at the liraglutide plus exercise group, we see that they lost a significant amount of fat mass, about 10 pounds. And not only did they not lose lean mass, they were able to add lean mass slightly, adding about 1 pound of lean mass on average. And so, to me, this is data kind of supporting the idea that any lean mass losses in other GLP-1 agonist research is likely due to... Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Talking Studies series. Not sure exactly where this episode's going to fall because I already have a few lined up and I'm thinking about pushing this one forward and risking ruining the intros to all the other videos that I've already named as episodes 2, 3, 4, etc. But nonetheless, this is a series where I talk about interesting individual research papers I've read, with the understanding that there's a caveat that it's important to take the overarching body of evidence for any given topic into mind and not overemphasize or overextrapolate based on any individual one study. But today we're going to look at a study called Healthy Weight Loss Maintenance with Exercise, Liraglutide, or Both Combined by Lundgren and colleagues. And some background on this paper is that, as the name implies, it involves a medication called liraglutide, which is a GLP-1 receptor agonist. And this is a type of medication that was originally used for diabetes treatment because it can stimulate insulin release from the pancreas in the context of elevated blood sugar levels. But over time, it was noticed that subjects or individuals taking these medications were also losing a significant amount of weight. And it turns out that GLP-1 agonists can also act as significant appetite suppressants via proposed mechanisms like slowing gastric emptying or the rate at which food moves from your stomach to your intestines, as well as influencing different neural pathways in your brain associated with cravings or satiety and hunger. Nonetheless, they have been shown to lead to significant weight loss, and so a lot of people have been adopting them. It's become pretty popular to take them for weight loss purposes in addition to the diabetes treatment use case that they first held. And in this regard, one criticism around GLP-1 agonists is that the weight loss they induce potentially consists of a lot of lean body mass loss in addition to fat loss. One caveat in this regard that I've seen some people talking about or bringing into the conversation is that lean body mass losses, particularly muscle loss, although lean body mass is just kind of a proxy for muscle mass that's often used in research, is also seen when losing weight via any typical reduced calorie diet, right? Just cutting calories alone often leads to losing lean body mass if the individual is not resistance training and eating enough protein. In this regard, I read a review paper called Preserving Healthy Muscle During Weight Loss by Cava et al., where they said, quote, weight loss achieved through a calorie reduced diet decreases both fat and fat-free or lean body mass in persons with normal weight. The contribution of fat-free mass loss often exceeds 35% of total weight loss, and weight regain promotes relatively more fat gain. In persons who are overweight or obese, fat-free mass contributes only to about 20 to 30% of total weight loss, end quote. And moving on to another paper I read in this regard, a systematic review of the separate and combined effects of energy restriction and exercise on fat-free mass in middle-aged and older adults, implications for sarcopenic obesity by Weinheimer et al. When looking at a bunch of studies that induced weight loss via energy restriction or cutting calories, they found, quote, when evaluating the composition of the body weight lost, 1/2 of the groups lost 25% of their body weight as fat-free mass. This is comparable to previously reported diet-induced fat-free mass changes in younger and middle-aged adults, end quote. So As I alluded to, it's well known that typical weight loss by cutting calories leads to decreases in muscle mass. And it's also fairly well known and consistent in research that I've read that adding an exercise protocol on top of a weight loss diet can prevent or mitigate the amount of muscle mass lost. For example, I read a paper called Resistance Training Prevents Muscle Loss Induced by Caloric Restriction in Obese Elderly Individuals, a systematic review and meta analysis by Sardelli et al. And they said, quote, the 6 randomized controlled trials included in the review applied resistance training 3 times per week for 12 to 24 weeks. And most caloric restriction interventions followed diets of 55% carbohydrate, 15% protein, and 30% fat. Resistance training reduced 93.5% of caloric restriction induced lean body mass losses, with similar reduction in fat body mass and body mass compared with caloric restriction, end quote. So, as they highlight there, resistance training in particular can preserve some of the muscle mass or mitigate some of the muscle mass losses that come with a typical weight loss diet. So, now the question remains whether or not the same is true in the context of weight loss induced by GLP-1 agonist use. And there aren't any studies I could find that look at this question directly. However, the paper we'll look at today did look at comparing different protocols using exercise, liraglutide, a GLP-1 agonist, or exercise plus liraglutide when it comes to weight maintenance following a weight loss period. The reason the authors were interested in looking at this is that when it comes to weight loss, there is an issue in that individuals tend to regain much or most of the weight that they've lost following that weight loss period. And so they were testing out different interventions that might facilitate maintaining weight loss after such a weight loss period. Quote, the prevalence of obesity is increasing with detrimental effects upon health. Obesity is characterized by excess body fat and is associated with physical inactivity, which also impairs health and increases the risk of death. A decrease in body weight of 3 to 5% has been associated with reduced obesity related risk factors, although a larger weight loss of more than 5 to 15% of the initial body weight is recommended for patients with coexisting conditions, morbid obesity, or both. Many patients have an initial large weight loss, but weight regain often occurs unless a structured weight maintenance program is followed, end quote. Moving on a little bit further in the introduction, quote, liraglutide, a glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist, is used in the treatment of obesity because it induces weight loss and maintains low-calorie diet-induced weight loss for at least 1 year, primarily by means of appetite inhibition. Whether exercise, medication, or a combination strategy constitutes the more effective approach for maintaining healthy weight loss remains an open question. We investigated the efficacy of 1 year treatment with a moderate to vigorous intensity exercise program, liraglutide at a dose of 3 milligrams per day, or the combination of exercise plus liraglutide as compared with placebo for healthy weight loss maintenance after weight loss induced by a low-calorie diet, end quote. So, in order to test these different protocols for maintaining weight loss after a weight loss period, the authors took obese individuals aged 18 to 65 without diabetes or any other serious medical conditions that would interfere with the study, particularly with carrying out the exercise portion of the study if they were assigned to an exercise group. And first, they had them follow a low calorie diet for 8 weeks. And this was a particularly restrictive low calorie diet, in my opinion, in that the subjects were restricted to just 800 calories per day. And after that 8 weeks, subjects who were able to reduce their weight by 5% or more were then randomized to 4 groups. First was placebo, which for 12 months would meet with a dietitian once per month and receive general dietary recommendations. When I looked up the description in the supplementary material, it was a pretty much a standard dietary protocol in that they recommended increasing vegetable and fruit intake, decreasing the intake of processed foods, um, limiting meat intake to leaner cuts of meat, increasing fish intake, not eating too much, increasing intake of foods with a higher satiety to calorie ratio, things like that. Pretty standard. These individuals were also told not to change their normal physical activity. All the other groups followed or had the same meetings with dietitians for 12 months, except one group had followed just an exercise protocol. Another group followed the exercise protocol plus taking liraglutide for 12 months, and another group just took liraglutide without any exercise protocol for 12 months. When it came to the exercise protocol, it was a combination of interval training as well as circuit training. In particular, the interval training was designed to meet the World Health Organization recommendations for weekly activity. Quote, the exercise program was designed to meet the World Health Organization recommendations on physical activity for health of a minimum of 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic physical activity or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity aerobic physical activity or an equivalent combination of both. Each participant was assigned to an instructor who had a bachelor's or master's degree in exercise physiology, who planned and monitored the individualized programs. After initial 6-week ramp-up phase, participants were encouraged to attend supervised group exercise sessions, which involved 30 minutes of vigorous intensity interval-based indoor cycling and 15 minutes of circuit training, 2 times per week, and to perform moderate to vigorous intensity exercise individually, which mostly involved outdoor or indoor cycling, running, or brisk walking, 2 times per week. Heart rate monitors were worn at all exercise sessions to determine whether the requirement regarding weekly time spent at moderate or vigorous intensity was met. The exercise program was structured but flexible, which meant that participants could substitute group exercise with individual exercise or vice versa. Participants could also reduce exercise frequency if the duration was prolonged or the intensity was increased. End quote. Now, notably, looking at the circuit training, it did contain or consist of some resistance type training movements or design. For example, they listed out what the circuit training might have looked at like for any given day. And one example was doing step ups, arm cranking, which I imagine is some type of, or similar to externally rotating the shoulder against resistance, elliptical training, boxing on a bag, dips on a bench. Another example was running or brisk walking, Russian twists, leg press on a machine, bicep curls plus shoulder pressing with dumbbells, back extensions. Another example was rowing, squats with a kettlebell held in front of the chest, jumping jacks, sit-ups/crunches, and arm cranking. So my point in describing all of these or reading off what the circuit training protocols were is that in theory, resistance training would be a better option for maintaining or building muscle mass than just endurance training. But although these protocols probably aren't optimal for building or maintaining muscle, I think it's reasonable that, especially considering the subjects in this study were untrained and hadn't been performing high intensity exercise for more than 2 hours per week regularly, this protocol is probably sufficient to at least maintain muscle mass, if not build muscle mass, although it's not optimal, like I said. Now, when it came to the liraglutide use, the subjects follow what I understand to be kind of a standard protocol, which is starting with 0.6 milligrams per day and then escalating the dose until they either reach the maximum of 3 milligrams per day or until they reached a point where they could no longer tolerate the side effects, at which point they stopped their dose right there. And the liraglutide only group and the liraglutide plus exercise group ended up averaging 2.8 milligrams per day and 2.6 milligrams per day, respectively, across the 12 months. Now, if we look at figure 1, we'll see some of the results for the entire study. I give kudos to the authors of this paper because the figures are really easy and useful. Looking at panel A on the left side, we'll see that the subjects lost a ton of weight in the first 8 weeks. And if we scroll down a little bit and look at panel B, we'll see that the same is true of body fat percentage. But it's interesting to note, if you look in the supplementary tables for this study, the distribution of that weight loss is as follows. They lost 13 kilograms, or about 28.8 pounds, of which 7.3 kilograms was fat mass and 5.1 kilograms was lean mass. This equates to 16 pounds of fat mass lost and about 11 pounds of lean mass lost. This is notable because about 40% of the weight lost was lean mass. Now, all of that probably isn't muscle mass because, for example, fat mass has, I think it's something like 10% of water, or consists of something like 10% of water. And water is accounted for in lean mass when it comes to DEXA scans, which is what they used in this study. But the point is that of the 11 pounds of lean mass lost, a significant amount of that is probably muscle mass. If we look at the other metrics in this supplementary table, I think it's notable to recognize that this weight loss did induce positive changes in a variety of different health markers. For example, they measured VO2 max as their proxy for cardiorespiratory fitness, and that improved. Glycated hemoglobin, which is HbA1c, or a kind of longer term marker of blood sugar levels, also improved. Systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure both improved. Resting heart rate improved. Insulin sensitivity as measured by HOMA-IR improved. Total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and triglycerides improved. So this is just another example of how weight loss, particularly for overweight, or in this case, obese individuals, can lead to a bunch of improvements in a variety of health markers. Now, moving on to the maintenance part of the study, if we go back to that figure 1, we'll see that the subjects in the placebo group regained 6.1 kilograms of weight. And if we do the math for those of you using the imperial system, this equates to about 13.4 pounds of weight regained. Looking at the exercise, liraglutide, and liraglutide plus exercise groups, particularly at the distribution of weight loss, we'll see that the exercise group gained 4.4 pounds. However, they lost 3.1 pounds of fat mass and gained 4.6 pounds of lean mass. So, although they technically gained weight, they lost fat and gained lean mass. So, it was a positive improvement in their body composition. Looking at the liraglutide only group, they lost 1.5 pounds, of which none was lean mass. And the liraglutide plus exercise group also lost weight. They lost 10.3 pounds of fat mass and gained 1.1 pounds of lean mass. So, interestingly, that liraglutide plus exercise group was able to continued during losing weight during the maintenance phase without losing any muscle mass. In fact, they gained a little bit of muscle mass. A couple of quotes from the study, quote, "During the 8-week low-calorie diet, the participants' body weight decreased by a mean of 13.1 kilograms, which was equivalent to a mean reduction in body weight of 12%. This decrease was accompanied by decreases in the body fat percentage, waist circumference, waist to hip ratio, glycated hemoglobin level, blood pressure, lipid levels, resting heart rate, and HOMA-IR. The Matsuda Index, cardiorespiratory fitness, general health perception, physical functioning, and emotional well-being increased," end quote. Moving on to another quote, quote, "All active treatment groups decreased body weight and body fat percentage after 1 year as compared with the increases observed in the placebo group. The combined strategy reduced the body weight and body fat percentage approximately twice as much as the single treatment strategies did, and was associated with additional health benefits such as improvements in the glycated hemoglobin level, insulin sensitivity, cardiorespiratory fitness, physical functioning, and emotional well-being," end quote. Now, before we get to my takeaways, there were a couple of interesting points the authors made in the discussion. First was a comparison to another study that used semaglutide across a similar time period for weight loss. And what they found was that the total weight loss, in terms of percentage of body weight, from the start to the end of the study in the liraglutide plus exercise group, was similar to this study using semaglutide. So it suggests that this uh, protocol of exercise plus liraglutide is comparable to something like semaglutide, which is, as I understand it, judged to be superior to liraglutide in terms of weight loss outcomes. I read a particular paper called GLP-1 Receptor Agonists, an updated review of head-to-head clinical studies. And if you scroll down to figure 2, which I'll throw up on the screen, you'll see semaglutide is the best GLP-1 agonist in terms of losing weight, according to this data. Notably, this study was published in 2021, and so it doesn't include tirzepatide, which, as I understand it, is kind of an up-and-coming GLP-1 agonist that is actually better than semaglutide. But anyway, my point is that the weight loss in this study we're looking at was similar to weight loss by this top GLP-1 agonist, or one of the top GLP-1 agonists, across a similar time frame. In addition, the authors highlight that there was a significant regain of weight in the individuals in just the placebo group. Quote, "The total weight reduction was approximately similar to the 15% weight loss that was observed after 68 weeks of treatment with GLP-1 receptor agonist semaglutide, administered subcutaneously at a dose of 2.4 milligrams once weekly as an adjunct to lifestyle change." In our trial, participants in the placebo group regained on average 6.1 kilograms, which was equivalent to 45% of the weight they had initially lost. This weight regain was accompanied by deterioration in all associated metabolic health related improvements. This result shows the critical importance of implementing structured treatment after weight loss as compared with the strategy of just 12 individualized consultations regarding weight and diet as provided in the current trial according to the recommendations of the Danish authorities for sustained weight loss, end quote. In addition, they bring up a point about heart rate metrics, in that something I didn't mention is previously it's been shown that GLP-1 agonists tend to lead to increases, or using GLP-1 agonists tends to lead to increases in heart rate. And that was shown in this study in that the liraglutide group saw an increase in their heart rate during the maintenance period. However, the group that was using liraglutide and also following the exercise protocol did not see this increase in heart rate. Quote, in accordance with previous studies, we observed an increased heart rate with liraglutide alone. Increased heart rate is generally considered an adverse effect associated with lower survival. We did not observe an increased resting heart rate when exercise was combined with liraglutide, a finding that supports the health-promoting potential of this combination, end quote. Now, moving on to my takeaways from this paper. First, this is another example of how normal diet-induced weight loss can lead to significant losses in lean mass. If we go to figure 2 and take a look at panel A, all the way on the left, the gray box highlights visually just how much lean mass was lost compared to fat mass that was lost during the initial weight loss period. Granted, this was, in my opinion, a pretty extreme weight loss protocol, and that subjects were heavily restricted to just 800 calories per day. But this is representative, based on what I've seen in other research papers, of how a significant amount of lean mass is lost during typical weight loss protocols that aren't implementing or including an emphasis on exercise or increased protein intake. My second takeaway is, just like the authors alluded to in that quote from the discussion, that this is, again, another example of how, without particular attention to maintaining weight loss, following a weight loss period, a lot of people will regain a significant amount of weight that they had just cut off. My third takeaway is that liraglutide in and of itself did not lead to losses of lean mass, at least in this study. Interestingly, if we look at the liraglutide only group who were taking liraglutide during the maintenance period, they did not see decreases in lean mass, even while seeing slight decreases in fat mass. And even more so, looking at the liraglutide plus exercise group, we see that they lost a significant amount of fat mass, about 10 pounds. And not only did they not lose lean mass, they were able to add lean mass slightly, adding about 1 pound of lean mass on average. And so, to me, this is data kind of supporting the idea that any lean mass losses in other GLP-1 agonist research is likely due to the lean body masses that are, or that come with weight loss from reduced calorie diets in general, not something that they're not something unique to GLP-1 agonist use and weight loss. Now, a couple more takeaways I have are really kind of suggestions or ideas, interests for future research on this topic, in that, like I alluded to at the beginning of this video, this paper is not exactly ideal for testing the question of whether or not adding exercise to GLP-1 agonist use during a weight loss phase will preserve lean body mass. Since it only looked at the maintenance phase following a weight loss period, I think it'd be interesting to see a paper where we implement exercise on top of GLP-1 agonist use during a weight loss phase to see whether or not this protocol can prevent losses in lean mass during a phase where subjects are more prone to losing lean mass. In addition, it would be interesting to test this protocol in individuals who are less overweight or less obese, in that, at least anecdotally, I think a lot of individuals are starting to take these medications just to lose maybe 10 pounds or 15 pounds, not to lose, 30 pounds. And it'd be interesting to see if there's any difference in the preservation of lean mass with GLP-1 agonists alone, plus GLP-1 agonists with an exercise protocol added on top of them in this population. I think that would be pretty useful or applicable when it comes to kind of the general population using these medications. And that wraps it up for this episode of the Talking Studies series. If you want more content like this, you can go check out Shortcut U on YouTube or on Substack, and you can also subscribe at both of those places if you want to support Shortcut U. If you're looking for something a little bit more concise and organized, the deep dive posts that I write on my blog on Substack are probably a better option for you than these videos, where I tend to run off on tangents and just kind of spew my nerdy thoughts at the camera. But anyways, thanks for listening, and I will catch you next time.